On February 6, 2014, in the snow-blanketed municipality of Rana, a team of 5 Finnish cave divers prepared for what would be one of the most demanding dives of their careers. Their names were Kai Kenkinen, Patrik Grönqvist, Jari Huotarinen, Vesa Rantanen, and Jari Yu. Their objective was to conquer Pluragrotta, Northern Europe's largest underwater cave system. This was no ordinary dive. Plura is a subterranean labyrinth stretching for kilometers, descending to a bone-crushing depth of 130 meters, over 426 feet below the surface. While a place of stunning geological beauty, it's also a realm of unforgiving danger, a maze of constricted passages, near zero visibility, and total blackness, where even the most experienced divers can find themselves hopelessly lost. The team's plan was audacious: to execute a full traverse from Plura's frozen entrance to a connected dry cave, Steinugelflugget. This route was a recent discovery for them. Just months earlier, Kai and Patrik had successfully navigated the traverse in the opposite direction. That monumental achievement had imbued them with the confidence to attempt it again, this time pushing from the frozen lake into the deepest, most treacherous parts of the Plura system. It was a testament to their skill and a dangerous gamble on their confidence. The journey to the cave itself was a grueling precursor to the dive. For nearly 15 hours, the team drove through the unforgiving winter landscape of Finland and Sweden, a van and trailer packed to the brim with specialized equipment. Inside were closed-circuit rebreathers, bailout cylinders, powerful underwater scooters, spare regulators, tools, and even a snowmobile to help them haul their gear across the icy, snow-covered terrain. The roads were treacherous, winter slick with sheets of snow and black ice, forcing them to drive with extreme caution. During the long hours of the drive, the divers repeatedly reviewed every detail of their plan. They had decided to split into 2 teams, separated by a 2-hour interval. This strategic staggering was designed to minimize sediment disturbance in the water, spread out their decompression obligations, and ensure at least one team was always in a position to support the other. By the time they finally arrived at Jordbro Farm, near the Plura cave, a bitter cold had settled in. The temperature had plummeted to -3 degrees Celsius. They rested, reviewing their dive plan one final time, the weight of the immense challenge ahead of them hanging in the frigid air. The next morning, at the first light of dawn, they began the arduous process of hauling their heavy sleds across the frozen surface of Plura Lake. To gain access to the water, they had to cut through a thick layer of ice with a chainsaw, carving a triangular hole just large enough for them and their bulky gear. The first team, comprised of Patrik and Jari Huotarinen, began their final preparations to descend around midday. Their equipment was nothing short of state-of-the-art: advanced closed-circuit rebreathers, powerful underwater scooters for propulsion, and a specially formulated trimix breathing gas, meticulously mixed to prevent the debilitating effects of narcosis and oxygen toxicity. Additionally, they carried multiple bailout tanks and a third, fully redundant backup rebreather. Everything appeared perfect. The water beneath the ice was astonishingly clear, with visibility stretching far into the cave's opening. Before slipping into the water, Patrik asked Huotarinen if they should wait for the others to begin, but Huotarinen simply gave the standard diver's signal: go. Without hesitation, the 2 men slipped beneath the icy surface and vanished into the black abyss. Their descent began smoothly, a slow and controlled immersion into the darkness. They followed a gently sloping corridor down to a depth of 34 meters, continuing for nearly 500 meters. The journey then took them briefly upward into a partially filled air chamber, a fleeting moment of respite before they plunged even deeper into the earth. From the chamber, the cave dropped sharply, a vertical descent that took them to 60 meters, then to 100, and finally to the maximum depth of their route, 130 meters. The tunnels narrowed, becoming a series of claustrophobic passages that forced them to thread their bodies carefully through jagged, angled rock. At the very bottom, they paused for a moment. On the cave walls, a guideline they had laid months earlier was marked with a circular plate and directional arrows. This was the point where Patrik had planned a crucial bailout drill. He practiced switching to his reserve rebreather, simulating a critical emergency. For a brief moment, everything seemed controlled, calm, and perfectly under their command. But a cave, especially one like Plura, has no mercy. On the long ascent, Patrik navigated through a particularly narrow 90-degree turn. When he looked back, the beam from Huotarinen's light was no longer visible. Then, suddenly, a frantic, desperate beam of light flashed up and down the universal signal of extreme distress. Patrik immediately raced back, his heart pounding in his chest. He found Huotarinen trapped, his underwater scooter's power cord snagged between two jagged rocks. Patrick worked quickly to free the scooter, expecting to see a look of relief, but Huotarinen's panic remained. He was flailing, desperately switching between his bailout gas and his rebreather, unable to stabilize his breathing. Panic is a diver's most dangerous enemy, especially at these depths. It disrupts a diver's breathing rhythm, leading to hypercapnia, a rapid and dangerous buildup of carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. This condition clouds judgment, accelerates exhaustion, and can quickly spiral into unconsciousness and death. Patrick tried to calm him, but Huotarinen was lost in desperation, tearing his regulators in and out of his mouth. In a single, catastrophic moment, he inhaled a mouthful of water. At 130 meters, the immense pressure and freezing temperature made the outcome instantly fatal. Huotarinen was gone. Patrick was left alone in the unforgiving blackness, trapped in a narrow tunnel. His partner's lifeless body was now blocking the only way forward. His bailout cylinder was snagged with Huotarinen's abandoned gear, and worst of all, his dive computer, the only thing calculating his path to safety, now demanded a full 7 hours of decompression to return to the surface safely. There was no choice. He had to make the agonizing decision to abandon his friend and begin a grueling, solo ascent. Every minute he spent deeper meant more decompression time and a higher risk of death. As Patrick began the slow, torturous climb upward, the second team, Kai, Vesa, and Jari Yu, were just entering the cave from the Steinugel-Flogget entrance. At first, their dive went smoothly. Vesa, ever cautious, had carried extra cylinders, prompting Kai to warn him they might be a hindrance in the tight passages. He was right. In one section, Vesa was forced to remove a tank to squeeze through, and later, his fin snagged on the guideline. These seemingly minor delays translated into hours of extra decompression time for them both, but the worst was yet to come. As they neared the constricted 90-degree passage, their lights cut through the water, revealing a horrifying sight: Jari Huotarinen's body floating motionlessly in the tunnel. The grim discovery sent a shockwave through the team, and then disaster compounded. Jari Yu began to show the same terrifying symptoms that had claimed Huotarinen: panicked breathing, desperate switching between his bailout gas and rebreather, and erratic, uncontrolled movements. Despite Kai's desperate efforts to calm him, Jari Yu succumbed to the panic and drowned in the very same tunnel. 2 men were now dead. Kai and Vesa pressed forward, but they were in a state of full-blown crisis. Their decompression obligations were skyrocketing, and their gas supplies were dwindling rapidly. Vesa struggled to make it through the restriction, physically exhausted and emotionally shattered. Kai, realizing the grim reality of their situation, came to a terrible conclusion. Visa's chances of survival were slim. If he stayed to help, he would likely die too. With crushing sorrow and a sense of profound guilt, Kai made the impossible decision to leave Vesa behind and turn back. Kai's situation became dire. His underwater scooter suddenly failed, forcing him to swim the remaining distance that he had expected to traverse in 15 minutes in a grueling 45. To make matters worse, his decompression schedule was now impossible to fulfill with the remaining gas. He had no choice but to skip mandatory stops, gambling that he could survive the ascent. Meanwhile, against all odds, Patrick and Vesa reached a dry chamber inside the cave. Both were suffering from the early stages of decompression sickness. Vesa's knee throbbed with excruciating pain, while Patrick's body shook uncontrollably from exhaustion and the bitter cold. Patrick surfaced in the dry cave around 9 p.m., hours later than planned. He waited anxiously, clinging to a sliver of hope, until Vesa finally arrived, limping and in pain but alive. Together, they huddled in the darkness, a testament to their harrowing survival. Kai, fighting alone, made it back to the surface hole in Plura Lake after 1 a.m. To his horror, a thin, new layer of ice had formed over the entry hole, sealing him in. Exhausted and desperate, he smashed through it and dragged himself onto the frozen surface, utterly spent. For a time, he believed he was the only survivor, but eventually Patrick and Vesa were reunited with him at the farm. 3 had survived, 2 had not. News of the tragedy spread quickly across Finland and Norway, a shocking story that captured the attention of the world. The 3 survivors were immediately hospitalized, suffering from severe decompression sickness and profound emotional trauma. Authorities were faced with a grim question: how to recover the bodies. British experts were consulted, but after reviewing the passages, they deemed the operation too dangerous. Officials made the heartbreaking decision to close the cave and leave the bodies where they had fallen, but the survivors could not accept that. In the spring, they returned, meticulously planning a recovery operation. Patrick and a fellow diver, Sami Pakarinen, led the dangerous mission. Vesa, still injured from his ordeal, served as the surface manager, while Kai, too traumatized to return, stayed behind. Finally, after months of waiting and planning, the bodies of Jari Huotarinen and Jari Yu were brought back to the surface, allowing their families to grieve and bury them with the dignity they deserved.